local high school students to be able to teach earth and space and weather and climate science activities to all of the local 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders of the North Shore. This is also the first year that we have brought back the Science Expo since the start of the pandemic. So we are super excited and very tired, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And there is opportunities to volunteer. If you are interested, just visit our website, which is tahoe.ucdavis.edu. And I will actually put a link in the chat so that you all have it in case you want to do a little fun science educational activities with some local students. No science background is required. We do on the fly training, and it's also a lot of fun. And Mary has requested that I introduce myself once again, which is perfect timing because I said I would start at 6:02. And so here we go. So I am moderating this grow your own high elevation gardening workshop. And so I can say with absolutely no bias whatsoever that the best presenter is about to come up, and it's me. So everybody give myself a warm welcome. And so no moderator needed for me, just me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by spotlighting myself so that in theory, now I should be big for all of you. And let me get my presentation going. So I kind of mentioned this to everybody who was, can everybody see my slides? I just realized that I can't see anybody, so I don't know. Dave or Mary, can you unmute yourself and let me know if you can see my slide?
No, I can't.
Okay, hold on a second then. And how about now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
And then I will mute myself again.
Excellent. So I kind of mentioned this to everybody who jumped on a little bit earlier, which is that I do have a lot of content to cover. We have lots of varieties that are going to be featured for this particular workshop. So there are a lot of slides, and I'm going to try to get through them as quickly as possible. But as you may have noticed, this lecture is being recorded and will be available on the Master Garden YouTube page over the next few days. And so if I miss something, or if I miss something, that's what the Q&A is for. And if I go through something that's a little too quickly, don't worry, it will be recorded. And I will also share my contact information, so you can always contact me if you have any questions. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with the spicy salads green. So my name is Alison Toy. I am a Lake Tahoe Master Gardener from the inaugural Lake Tahoe Master Gardeners class back in 2012. I'm also the Education Programs Manager at the UC Davis Tahoe Environmental Research Center, as well as the Demonstration Gardens Manager at the Tahoe City Demonstration Garden, as well as at the North Lake Tahoe Demonstration Garden in Incline Village. And I hope my resources hang tight. So if you have any questions during my talk, feel free to direct them to Mary Wall. And I think she has renamed herself Q&A. So if you put them in the chat, I'm sure she'll catch them as well. But ideally, just send them directly to Q&A Mary Wall. So let me do a little quick plug for UC Davis Tahoe Environmental Research Center, TERC, where I work full time. We are a leader in aquatic and terrestrial research. You may have seen our research vessel out on the lake, usually out there every 10 days, taking clarity measurements. We have 2 education centers, one in Incline Village, which is our larger education center, the Tahoe Science Center, as well as the Erickson Education Center in Tahoe City, which is self-guided. The Incline Village Tahoe Science Center is currently open for reserved tours only, and so you can book those on our website, tahoe.ucdavis.edu, at the bottom of this slide. Our demonstration gardens are the Tahoe City Demonstration Garden, which is off of Lake Forest in Tahoe City, as well as the North Tahoe Demonstration Garden, which is located at the Sierra Nevada University campus, soon to be UNR campus in Incline Village. And actually, we have a very large garden workday scheduled for Incline that is going to involve testing different commercial soils to see which one has the greatest success. We will be testing Miracle Grow compared to Full Circle compost soil. They were very kind enough to donate the soil. And then we're also going to amend the soils with biochar just to see how wildfire, which is such a huge part of our lives at this point, affects soil and crop production as well. And that's all going to be against a control of native soil. So we're really excited about that project. We're also going to be installing 2 xeriscaping examples in hopes of establishing over the next couple of years 2 demos for xeriscaping. And so in theory, we're going to see if we can do 0 irrigation gardening that's really beautiful in the Tahoe area. Okay, so let's talk a little bit before I get into all of the leafy greens, the point of these workshops, which is there's a lot of different points, right? It's about establishing this community of gardeners who are supporting each other, sharing information. It's about understanding what grows well in Tahoe, this varietal phenology, but it's also to be conscientious about your garden, that we live in this really beautiful, pristine area, and everything that we do in our watershed is going to affect our lakes and streams. And so I know Dave really emphasized it. I missed Heather's lecture, but I'm sure she talked quite a bit about it, which is that anything that you do to your plants on the land will potentially have an effect on your algae in the water. And we want to keep our Lake Tahoe beautiful and blue and clear. And so as we are suggesting amendments for your soil in the form of fertilizers and such, just be mindful about your application. I know Dave in his beans and peas lectures talked about how if you're doing like a 5-1-1 versus like a 20-2-2, like one is just stronger than the other, and you just need to be very conscientious about less of the more stronger soil, a little bit more of the weaker soil or weaker fertilizer. I'm of the opinion personally just to go for on the weaker end and dilute it. And I've always had pretty good success on that front. And we can talk a little bit more about that when I actually get to the fertilizer section. And one of the best practices for applying your fertilizer is always hold off applying if there's the potential for runoff. So if there is precipitation on the forecast, maybe just hold off and apply after the precipitation event has happened. Our soils tend to be a little bit on the hydrophobic side, and so uptake tends to be really slow. So if you apply it on a day where we have precipitation, there's a very good chance that that's just going to run off, not help your plants and not help the lake. So just a little soapbox for protecting our beautiful lake, which we use that water to water our beautiful plants, right? Okay. So now we get into the spicy salads. I'm super excited about all the varieties that we have to share with you. And guess what? Your summer salads are about to get a whole lot spicier. No more just boring lettuce, although there is a couple lettuces. And you all know, if you've seen my my presentations before, how much I love kale. So there's no getting away from the kale. But we also have some really exciting varieties that you don't regularly see in your local grocery store. So it's something a little bit different and something that is going to add just a little pop into your salads. So let us know what you think. So I was remiss in including a section in my survey this past year where I give you the opportunity to tell me all the things that I've done horribly wrong in my presentation and maybe some of the things that you've liked. So these are just some of the comments that I had last year. I normally feature tons of memes, tons of jokes, tons of pictures of my dog. As I mentioned, I have a lot of content to cover, so there will be not as much of that. It will be sprinkled throughout because I can't get away from that. All my pictures generally have my dog in it. It's just unavoidable. But just so you know, this year, the survey is especially important. I didn't get as many responses last year as I did the year before. And so you will have the opportunity to tell me all the things that I do wrong. So feel free to let me have it. Okay, so let's start off with why grow kale. I really don't need to talk about this too much because you're here. Obviously, you want to grow kale, or maybe you just want the spicy greens. But let me tell you, just in case you need to tell your neighbors why they need to grow kale of anything. First of all, it makes you feel good. And I don't mean nutritionally, I mean as a gardener. Because as a gardener, kale is always going to be your highest rate of success. And all of the data shows from all of the results we collected from all of our participants, kale always does really, really well. Very high percentage, always 80s and above in terms of high percentage of success. So you'll feel good about your green thumb and your gardening skills if you plant kale. It's also very neighborly. So let's take a look at that. So this last picture right here is one of the last big harvests I did of kale. And of course you can see my now 2 dogs. And I actually distributed a lot of this kale throughout my neighborhood because I was literally at the point where I was like, I can't do anything else with this kale. And I feel like other people will appreciate it. And I was forcing it on people, giving them ideas of ways to use their kale via smoothies, via chips, via soup, via collard green styled. And everybody loved it. And it's a great way of getting to know your neighbors and having them appreciate having you in your neighborhood. It's high yield. You can, as you can see, I do multiple collections like this throughout the year. I'll collect in the wintertime. I'll collect in the following spring. You're going to get a lot of kale if your kale is successful. Finally, it's Tahoe hardy. So you can see this picture in the middle here. That was the result of a chipmunk. Went on vacation, took it all out completely. And I thought for sure it was a goner but I kept watering it just because I was like, it's kale, it could come back. And sure enough, it came back. And you know what's funny about the middle picture is I took it after it started regrowing. I wish I'd taken a picture earlier. There was no leaves on it whatsoever for it. So I thought for sure it was an absolute write-off at that point. But there it is. It didn't grow quite back to the same size leaves as it had been producing, but still good size teenager type leaves. So grow kale. It's amazing. And so next, why grow lettuce? We set you up for success. The seedlings that we get, they've already gone through the tough stage of germination. And I will say that one of the reasons why we end up having 9 varieties to share with you is because there were issues with germination over at the Desert Farming Institute that handles the germination seed to seedling stage. And when I talked to Jill over there, she was thinking, we dealt with some really weird weather in these last couple months, right? It was super, super warm for a really, really long time. I even planted stuff in April. And I know everybody says not to plant anything before June in Tahoe, but I still planted things in April because it was just so warm. And so things were doing really well. A lot of things did not survive those last couple of snowstorms, but you know what? My bok choy and kale were perfectly fine. So just saying. So the seedlings that you're getting have already gone through the tough stage of getting from seed to seedling. And so you have these beautiful, healthy seedlings to plant. So we're setting you up for success with lettuce. It's a compact little plant. I love that about it. It grows so well in small containers, shallow root system. I use 1 gallon pots and all of my lettuce goes into pots. It's just easy to contain them that way. It's easy to move them for different sun, different shade, for surprise frost potentially. So lettuce is great. It's an excellent add-on to any meal. I have some pictures. I love making spring rolls in the summertime for my lunch, and you can see it went straight from that upper picture being plucked to directly into my spring roll lunch. So little addition, little crunch, a little bit of healthiness into my what might be otherwise a somewhat carb heavy lunch. And the most important thing about growing lettuce is that when you grow, you know, and it's truly a reason that I really think that everybody should think about, because it's kind of key us living here in Tahoe. So these are just some of the reports of E. coli outbreak from the CDC, starting back from 2018 all the way to 2021. You may notice a common factor in these E. coli outbreaks. Lots of romaine, some ground beef, chopped salads, romaine, packaged salad, baby spinach, cake mix, interestingly enough, leafy greens, and clover sprouts. So leafy greens do tend to be classified as one of the dirtier vegetables. And that shouldn't scare you from growing your own. If anything, it should encourage you to grow your own, because the whole reason for why you grow your own is that lettuce is almost 95% water. So if your water is contaminated, your lettuce is going to be contaminated as well. And kale is also about 84% water. So if you have contaminated water in your kale, and then in large growing operations, there is a greater opportunity of that happening, then you might have contaminated lettuce. But if you're in our area, in the Tahoe Truckee area, and you're watering your lettuce and kale with some of the best water in the world, you're going to have some of the best lettuce and kale in the world. And you can also eat it without fear of potentially E. coli. So yeah, with water contamination, not so much of an issue here in the Tahoe area. You are in control of your water, and you have at your resource some of the best Tahoe water. So why the spicy greens? We've done kale and lettuce for the last 3-4 years at this point. I think I've done it for 3 years, and Mary did it the year before me. So many a cozy plant. I think I try sometimes too hard to be a little cutesy, and I don't know exactly what I meant by many a cozy plants, other than the fact that many of them don't require as much spacing, and so you can probably maximize your growing. Your salads with the kick. I eat a lot of salad during the summertime, and it's not because I'm a healthy person, it's because our house is really, really hot. And so we don't cook in the summertime unless it's grilling outside, because we do not put any additional heat into our house in the summertime. So we eat a lot of salad. And my husband was actually making fun of me because I eat the same salad over and over again. And so I started branching out, and then just started discovering that there's all these really flavorful greens out there from the farmers markets. And then I wanted to see if I could just grow them myself instead of trying to make it over to the farmer's market during days where I'm working from 8 a.m. to like 8 p.m. So why not give it a try? Diversity is key to a balanced salad. Not all of these greens are created equal. None of them are created equal. They all have different levels of nutritional value. So if you have a diverse salad, you're far more likely to have your balanced nutritional load. And finally, the we are family equals success, which is that a lot of these varieties are in the same family as kale. And you know, I love kale. I just told you how successful kale is. They're all in the Brassicaceae family, the mustard family. So if we've had such great success with kale, why wouldn't we have such great success with some of its brethren? Okay. So here it has been your success for lettuce and kale. I won't go over it too much, but you can kind of see that kale, and I equate success with, it's on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most successful, 1 being not successful. Everybody who is rated 4 to 5. So 84% has, 85% technically, have said that kale has always been successful. And lettuce is about 60% approximately. If you wanted to throw in the extra number 3s for the mediocre success, also really high success level. So we already know we can grow in Tahoe successfully lettuce and kale. Let's try to branch out a little bit more. That was the 2020 data previously. Now we have the 2021 data. And one thing I'll point out is I had 72 responses from you all in 2020. So that made for much more statistical significance. 18 responses in 2021, come on. Help me out this year. All right, here's the nutritional content, just showing you that not all grains are created equal, and it's definitely in your best health interest to diversify. Okay, let's talk about the varieties we have. Casper Kale. I'm really excited about this one. It's beautiful. It literally looks like an ornamental kale to me. but ornamental kale, if you've ever planted it, while edible, is not very palatable. So this one is not only beautiful, but it's also considered very flavorful, very sweet, and very tender in texture. So it starts off in its baby leaf form as being all green, and then the plant will grow out to be 2 feet to about 30 inches. And I have for you to view some of the babies that will be heading your way. And you can see they do start off all fully green. And then as they start to get to maturity, you'll start seeing these splotches of ivory moving from the middle vein. And you'll have these really gorgeous curly leaf, the classic curly leaf kale. And if you have seen me present before, you know, for me, curly leaf kale means kale chips. And so I love making kale chips with curly leaf kale because all of those little frilly edges are so great at capturing all of the seasoning and just having this really tasty, delicious crunch. CNR kale, red 1039. Really rolls off the tongue, right? This is just a seed that was developed by a company called CN Seeds. And this is also one of the problem children. So we did not have a high germination rate with this particular variety. It's known as a baby leaf kale. And one thing that's really cool about this, for the ones that do end up getting this is supposed to be an incredibly hardy species or variety. And so you can be harvesting these baby leaves all year long into the following spring. So something to potentially look forward to. Known to have a mild and sweet flavor, so good for salad. And for those who like smaller kale chips, I like the big ones that are like the size of my face personally, but if you like the smaller ones that are bite-sized, this will be a great one for kale chips. As I mentioned, low germination rate, so you may or may not be able to get this particular variety. We'll see. So one of the substitutions that the Desert Farming Institute did for us, because there was such a low germination rate with the previous one, was also throw in some black magic kale. And this is kind of opposite of the CN Cal red kale in the sense that this is a really big kale. It's your classic bumpy leaf kale. So lacinato, Dino, or Tuscan, goes by many names. It's very dark blue, almost black tinted, hence the name Black Magic Kale. Takes about 61 days to get to a full size. This is a really tight leafed plant. So you can kind of even see in this picture how close the leaves are together, which is great for multiple harvests throughout the year. Weird. Okay. Now, some of the new mustards we're featuring this year, the new Brassicaceae family. We have the green coin Tatsoi, also known as the mustard spinach or spoon spinach. It has these small, dark green, smooth shaped leaves that are very compact. The rosette, which you can see, can be either flattened or upright, and it kind of depends on the temperature. So it tends to grow in a more flattened shape in colder temperatures and more upright in warmer temperatures. So it might look different in spring and fall than it does potentially in summer. We'll kind of see how it goes. I've never planted this one before. And so I'm very excited to see how it goes. And I'm excited to hear from all of you to see how you did with this plant. It's considered best eaten raw, although you can stir fry it, and it has a mild mustard flavor. So not super spicy, but definitely a little bit more spice than your traditional romaine. So this plant grows pretty quickly. 18 days, you'll have your baby leaves. 45 days, it'll be full size, about 10 inches to 14 inches tall. One thing cool about this one, it tends to have the ability to tolerate dry areas. And so if you have particular areas that meet the growing conditions, but tends to be a little bit more dry, this might be the plant for you. So while this plant generally prefers direct sowing because the roots tend to be a little bit more on the sensitive side. We are going to be trying to do a transplant, so we shall see how that goes. So you want to transplant it when it's about 2 inches high. And so you can see that we have a variety of sizes happening here. Some in the front, not quite there yet. Some right about here, pretty much ready for transplanting. So you'll get these little plugs and it has a little hole on the bottom. You're going to just gently press into the hole with maybe your pinky finger to kind of just loosen up the roots a little bit, and it should pop right out. And once again, we want to be as gentle as possible when transplanting this particular variety, as it does tend to be sensitive in the roots. So a lot of times with planting things like kale, I recommend ruffling the roots. I am not recommending it for the Tatsoi, and nor am I recommending it for the Mizuna. So a lot of these Asian varieties of leaves tend to be a little root sensitive. And so we just want to be very gentle with them during the transplanting process. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we actually get to the planting and growing section. So Mizuna is another mustard green. This one I'm very, very excited about too. I'm excited about all of them. And so this is actually one that I buy regularly at the farmer's market. And after purchasing bag after bag of this lettuce or this mustard, I thought to myself, well, we should definitely give this one a try. It's in the same family as kale. Let's give it a shot. So this is not the variety that I normally get at the farmer's market. The one I get is normally very green. So we have this beautiful burgundy to dark purple color. When you see the seedlings, the red kale and the Mizuna look very similar. So the difference is going to be looking for this dark purple color. So the red kale has like this very deep red, but there are these purplish hues that you'll see with the Mizuna. And then you also can see that these leaves aren't nearly as deeply forked and serrated as the kale leaves are. So those are kind of like the two things that you'll look the difference for. If you ever have any doubt which one you're planting, just send me a message. I'll take a look and we'll figure out which one you have. So this Mizuna has a delicate texture, about 20 days till you get your baby leaves, 40 to adult full-size leaves. It's cold tolerant, has a zingy mustard flavor, and bolt resistant. So this one likes it to be cold. And actually, I just realized I didn't mention this, but the green coin Tatsoi is actually only somewhat cold tolerant. So if we should have a freeze, you're going to want to cover this one up, potentially add a little hot water bottle next to it throughout the course of the night so that you don't freeze your Tatsoi. Mizuna, however, very cold tolerant, will probably withstand a freeze similar to the way that kale does as well. Okay, and then there was the bok choy, the bok choy. Has these brilliant green leaves with this bright white stem. It's the first organic bok choy on the market. You can harvest a baby bok choy 40 to 45 days and a bok choy 55 to 60 days. It's full size. You're looking at anywhere between 8 to 14 inches in height and 4 inches across the base. This one, like the Tatsoi, has a light frost tolerance. Cover it if we have any last minute surprise freezes. Bolt resistant. And one thing that I love about bok choy is that it provides multiple textures for your salad, because you have this hardier texture at the stem and these lighter, leafier textures at the leaves. And so you get all of these textures mixed into your salad. It has this light mustard spice, and the flavor is equated to be between cabbage and chard. Okay, so it was really funny. Before this presentation started, Dave was talking to me and saying, I don't know how you're going to get through all of these different varieties. And so one of the things that I have figured out after creating an individual slide for all the different varieties is that there's a lot of similarities in terms of the life cycle, the growing, and the harvesting of all of the mustards of the Brassicaceae family, the brassica, the cabbage genus, they're all the same as well, which is that they are all biennials, meaning that if you are careful in not exposing them to too much heat, if you are careful in not getting them too cold for just the bok choy and the tatsoi. And if you're watering regularly, they won't bolt. And in fact, will continue to produce new leaves for you to harvest throughout the winter. And a lot of times they won't bolt until spring this next year. And I've had some kale varieties that even the following year, it doesn't bolt. I've had a Siberian kale that we tested out, I want to say 3 seasons ago, that never bolted for me. Just continued to produce leaves. So for the most part, this information isn't as relevant unless you're going to collect the seeds. This is just general information about the life cycle of your brassicas. And so if you want to harvest seeds, which I highly recommend that you do, if anything, I have been looking into a mustard recipe, which I thought would be kind of cool to do with all of the seeds that you can harvest from your mustards. And you can have like potentially a very diverse mustard that you grew and made yourself. So basically what you're doing is you want it to bolt, and you can see here are the old kale leaves. You don't want to harvest those leaves anymore once it bolts. Those leaves will be especially bitter if you harvest after it bolts. And so you see this flower head and these gorgeous yellow flowers. And that's not quite the stage yet. What you're looking for are these little black pods. Once you see these little black pods, those are the capsules that have the seeds inside. You can cut off the entire head, place it in a paper bag, shake vigorously to get the seeds out, and then just store it in a dark, cool place until next growing season. And most of your seeds should last, as long as you're storing them correctly, for up to about 4 years. So let's talk about the commonalities of these brassicas, how they grow, how similar they are, how they can grow together. So if you read most of the literature, they recommend full sun. And my response to reading stuff like that is I'm like, but do you recommend full Tahoe sun? Because anybody who has been in full Tahoe sun for an extended period of time knows that we have some pretty gnarly sunlight. And from our experience, a lot of these mustards do not like really strong heat. They become bitter, they become a little dried out. So while the recommendation is 6 hours of sun, I recommend maybe 3 to 4 hours of strong morning sun that potentially track where the shading happens in your garden. Spend a day, go outside every once in a while, because you should go outside, why not? And take a look at where the sun is, where the shade is at that point in time. And you can find a good spot to plant your brassicas that have that strong morning sun, or maybe that strong late afternoon sun that potentially is shaded in the morning or the afternoon. And I don't mention it in this slide, but I do have planting cheat sheets at the end that kind of talk about that a little bit more. So that kind of goes to my whole point of using tall plants and trees to shade during the sunniest times of the day. During the spring, go nuts, let them get as much sun as possible, but during the summer, give them some shade during the really strong periods of the time. Soil conditions. They all like organic, rich, moist, but well-drained soil. So I highly recommend mulching. And I know Heather, even though I missed her lecture, talked about the need for mulching. A thick layer of mulch is really going to help reduce that evaporation that we get in those strong summer heats, and help to keep our soils really moist. So the pH for kale tends to be about a 6 to 7. So they really like the acidic soils that we tend to have here in Tahoe. The other mustards have a little bit more of a finicky, smaller range, if you will, 6.5 to 7. So you do have the opportunity to amend your soil if necessary. If your soil ends up being too acidic, I recommend using lime, but just be really careful in terms of your application. And you can potentially reach out to any of the master gardeners if you want to get some advice on how to amend your soil. So with all of the leafy greens, they prefer a nitrogen heavy fertilizer. But they do also need a moderate amount of potassium phosphorus. So I personally like fish emulsion. I've seen a bunch of different people over the course of our survey suggest different things, and I'll kind of share them with you as we get a little further. But that tends to be a 5-1-1. So 5 for the nitrogen and then 1-1 for the potassium and phosphorus. Watering, I recommend early morning. That's when your plant is done respiring and is getting ready to process the sunlight and create its sugars, and it needs water. So highly recommend watering early in the morning, as well as using either a soaker hose or drip irrigation at the base, because that's going to prevent the water from just being directly on the leaves. It's going to increase root absorption of your water as well as prevent mildew. Other things to kind of note about brassicas is be careful when transplanting the Mizuna and the Tatsoi and the Bok Choy. Like I mentioned, those do tend to be susceptible to root damage. Before you plant, remove any yellow leaves that might be there. We want all of the resources to be going into those healthy leaves, not those yellowing, dying leaves. And the other thing is, especially with the Brassicaceae family, crop rotation is important. And in fact, most literature suggests 2 to 4 years minimum per location. So if you have a spot where you planted kale last year, you may want to look for another spot this year, or potentially do a little soil exchange in that location, just because they have a high propensity for pathogens in the soil. And so the longer you keep those mustards in that one spot, the greater chance you are to have more disease and more pests in that area. So that's how all the brassicas are kind of similar, but they also grow apart in terms of their needs as well. So for example, containers. As I mentioned, I do like container gardening. As somebody who rented for a majority of her life in Tahoe, I was very adamant about being able to take my plants with me if I needed to go. And so I've grown in Tahoe as growing in containers. So Kale and Bok Choy are a little bit more needier. You're looking at about a 5-gallon size container. Tatsoi, about a 2-gallon. Mizuna, 1 gallon. If you're spacing it, we have, in terms of like into the ground or into a raised bed, you want to give kale approximately 18 inches or more. Bok choy, one thing that's nice about this big bok choy is it's very compact, and so you can give it about 12 inches of space, about a foot. And the Mizuna and Tatsoi is a little bit more compact, a little cozier, so about 10 inches of space. And now we're going to talk about harvesting, and we have the odd one out, and that is the bok choy. So let's start with the kale though. So the kale, mentioned harvesting before, you can kind of see in these pictures right here that we're cutting from the outer leaves towards the inside. And you definitely don't want to pluck the center leaves, the terminal bud, because then you'll stop the growing. And then you just keep harvesting throughout the season. I generally recommend about a 50% harvest. I know people do more, and the plant still continues to grow. So, but if you plant a lot of kale like me, you probably don't need more than 50% harvest. And also, if it's forming flowers, don't pluck the leaves. I mean, you can, they'll just be really bitter, and maybe you can just saute it up and put it in soup and it won't be as bitter, but I don't want to hear complaints about bitter kale if you plucked your leaves after it's bolted. Oh, and just saying, this is a really fun picture from me here, is that this was the harvest that I did at the beginning of December of last year, just to kind of show you that you really can harvest kale all year long. This was a wonderful little harvest that went into a soup. And now harvesting Mizuna and Tatsoi, you have a couple of choices. So you can harvest it similar to the way that I described for kale, where you're doing the outer leaves towards the inside, or they have this cut and come again process where basically you're cutting off all of the leaves and leaving about an inch of the base. And that way you have a huge handful of this mustard green, and then it will continue to grow once you've done that, as long as you've left about an inch of the base. And so with baby greens, with the Mizuna, you can do it when it's about 2 inches tall. If you want to wait for them to be a full size for both of them, you're waiting for the leaves to be about 5 to 8 inches long. And then once again, or you can do it kale style, outside to the inside. So bok choy. I think the really prized bok choy is for the entire head. I will recommend that I'm going to be harvesting mine just like I do with kale outside, inside to continue with production. The other issue I have with doing a full head is that we do tend to get a lot of aphids in the area. And if you're having this tight, compact head, it definitely makes the aphids a little harder to spot. And so unless you're being really, really diligent, I would suggest harvesting it kale style. But if you don't want to, if you want a challenge, go for it. You're going to wait for that head to look sturdy is the word that they described. And you're looking for the stems to be widening at the base. So once it gets to that nice curvature that you see in the bok choys that you see at the stores, you can cut right at the soil line and you have your full head harvest of bok choy. All right, moving on to lettuce. Whew. All right, we have two different varieties. The very dirty romaine, but not for us, right? Because we're growing it in Tahoe. And we have an oak leaf lettuce type. And this is just a chart that kind of just shows all the different varieties of lettuce. I'm also growing arugula this year, another spicy green. So I'm also really excited to see how that does. Okay, so Coastal Star is a lettuce that I think is, it's how I prefer my men. It's tall, it's dark, and it's romantic. And like my husband, it is a little dense, but very tender hearted. So when I was like reading up about Coastal Star, I was like, oh, just how I like my men. You do want to protect the romaine from a hard frost. It is a lettuce, 95% water. It will freeze. It's very heat tolerant, and it takes about 55 days to get to full size. It's full flavored. And if you want, you can do that full head for harvesting, and you kind of see in that picture that tender romaine heart. And I will show you that the Coastal Star is ready to plant. It is literally bursting at the seams. So if you get a Coastal Star, transplant as soon as possible. All right, the Buckley lettuce. So this is that oak leaf lettuce, very aptly named if you've ever grown up around oak trees, which I did. Leaves have that similar curvature around there, just like an oak leaf. It's very glossy, very red, and it grows uniform, which is kind of cool. So all of your lettuce after you harvest will be about the same size. So 30 days for your baby leaves, 55 days for a full size. It does grow in an upright, tight rosette. The elongated stems make it very easy to cut. And so this will be a really, really good one for that cut and come again, because they're all the same size once it gets to full size, and you'll have uniform lettuce, which is pretty awesome, and it'll grow again. Lettuce life cycle, once again, lots of extra information, but you're looking for these little furs here after it bolts, and that's when you know that it's ready to be harvested. And once again, cut off the entire head, put it in a bag, shake vigorously. You'll get these little seeds right here, and they'll be set for planting next season. So growing lettuce, once again, they recommend full sun, but I don't recommend it for Tahoe. Our sun is just too strong for the full sun. So give it that 3 to 4 hours of strong morning sun. And one thing great about container gardening is you can give it full sun in the morning, and then you can move it to a shady spot. It's awesome. And it's a shallow rooted plant that's compact. Like if there's a frost, you can move it inside. That's great. So kind of hit my point ahead of the time, but basically in the other section down here, it's great for containers. The key is that if you do plant in a container, you have a higher rate of evaporation, right? Less soil. And so you just need to be more diligent with the water. Put your finger in. I usually do about 1 inch to 2 inch. If your finger comes out clean, that means that your soil is probably not moist enough and you need to water. Sowing conditions, shallow roots. Like all leafy greens, it likes that organic, rich, moisture holding, well-drained soil. We recommend amending your soil for all these leafy greens before actually planting. Can withstand some acidic conditions, 6.2 to 7. And like the kale, we want that nitrogen-rich fertilizer if you're going to choose to fertilize your lettuce. Light frequent watering, but do not overwater. That is definitely one of the #1 reasons why people end up killing their plants. Root rot is a real thing, and we do not want to water too much. So one of the things that you can do to kind of minimize the watering is, as I mentioned before, mulch, mulch, mulch. Maintain that moisture, and it also keeps those leaves off of the ground so that it's not in contact with your wet soil, so your leaves stay in a really great condition for harvesting. Oh yeah, see, containers. How awesome is it to be able to have your container of butter lettuce to just harvest it directly off of your deck, and then you can make your salad, you can make your spring rolls. So easy. And look, this is just a simple plastic container, and I love these ones. They're about 8 inches tall, about a gallon container, and they're plastic, so they're light. It has drainage at the bottom. They're super cheap. Ask me more about them if you're interested in using these containers. I'm not sponsored. Okay, harvesting your leaves. So you have to make a choice, your lettuce. You have to make a choice between your leaf harvest or your head harvest. And once again, I would steer you towards harvesting leaves. It's nice having salads all throughout the year, and fresh salads all throughout the year. If you're going for the head, once again, just be on the watch for things like aphids. So for leaves, you want to pick in the morning, because as it warms up, the quality deteriorates. You want to be careful because the roots are shallow, as I've mentioned several times. So maybe use scissors rather than trying to pull it off directly, less likely to pull off the entire plant. So with the leaves, for the oak leaves, like I said, let them grow to full size and do that cut and come again. Leave that 1 inch. And if you do it this way as well, once again, you're cutting down on aphids, mold, and fungi. If you're doing the head with the romaine, you want to wait for it to be firm, but not hard. And the key with romaine is you're looking for that midrib to be fully elongated, and then you would cut straight to the soil for a full head harvest. Or you can do the lettuce leaf hack, that come and come again, cut and come again style, which is just cutting, leaving a couple of inches at the base, and your romaine will regrow. And you can actually do this with your store-bought lettuce as well, your little lettuce life hack. If you buy romaine often, you can always put the base in water, leave about 2 inches, and it will continue to regrow. Okay, this is probably the most exciting one that we're planting. And it was also probably the most troublesome one of all of the varieties that we had from Desert Farming Institute. And I'd actually never heard of strawberry spinach until Dave introduced me to it. So most of the time it is grown as an annual. It is an annual, but it's self-seeding. So a lot of people consider it a perennial because, I mean, just look at the number of berries. Of course, it self-seeds. You leave those berries in place and they go bad, and not necessarily go bad, but they go to seed and they fall to the ground, you will have new strawberry spinach the next year. This is an old school plant. It's native to moist mountain valleys. And in fact, I believe the history says that they found this variety, like rediscovered it in monasteries. Kind of interesting. It's an herbaceous annual, gently toothed, as you can see in this picture, not super serrated like the Mizuna or the kale, and kind of spade shape, and not really strawberry-like, despite what the name might mislead you to believe. More mulberry-like, mildly sweet on long spindly stems, related to spinach, and the leaves do have a similar flavor and nutritional profile, which is great because spinach is definitely high on the list of nutritional content. And you want to harvest the leaves before bolting. But of course, this would actually be one of the plants you want to bolt because you want the berries, but you want the leaves and the berries. So harvest the leaves away when it's in leaf production. Once it bolts, stop harvesting those leaves. Once it fruits, no nuts, only bolts. Then you can actually start plucking the fruits off. You want the fruit to be a deep red color. And once again, it's self-seeding. If you don't end up liking it and you don't want it in your garden anymore, make sure you deadhead this plant. Otherwise, more than likely, if you've had success growing this in your garden, it will come back. This is another variety that only has a light frost tolerance. And so if we do have a freeze, just prepare to cover and keep it warm. But this one's a heat lover. Unlike all of the other varieties I've talked about, this is the one that you want in the full sun. Loves sunlight, and it can benefit from 3 to 4 hours of strong sun, but you can let it just like roast in the sun. It's going to enjoy that. So before transplanting, you want to amend your soil with either compost or manure. pH, there was some discrepancies in terms of the information I found, anywhere from 6.0 to 6.8 up to 7.5. So 6 to 6.8 was kind of like the sweet area. So it likes the acidic soils that we have here in Tahoe, but apparently can withstand some alkaline conditions up to 7.5. Like all the leafy greens, we want to have a high nitrogen in terms of any fertilizer. Once again, water regularly, do not water, mulch. I can't emphasize mulch enough. It's going to be so key, especially with our hot summers in maintaining moist soils. This one grows about so that's the wrong symbol. It's 1 foot wide and 2 foot tall, not 1 inch wide and 2 inches tall. So that's just a typo on my part. So make sure you realize that. And it, once again, easily reseeds. Be aware of that. Hand pluck the leaves. The leaves are literally ready for harvest once leaves have formed. Once fruits have formed, don't harvest the leaves. Wait for the berries to be deep red. Deadhead, kind of already mentioned all that stuff before. I'm going to skip that because I just don't have a lot of time. And so now I've kind of told you what you need to do to plant and harvest your plants. But let's talk about where the real problems can potentially be. And that starts off with the pests that we have in Tahoe. And you can kind of see back in 2020, we all dealt with a wide variety of pests. And this is what the Google data shows, but aphids in 2020 tended to be the #1 thing. And 2021, still aphids, but also squirrels. And I know I have a problem with both aphids and squirrels. I have a really great handle on the aphids, less of a handle on the squirrels, but the dogs do help. So what do? First of all, you remain calm, right? So with aphids, #1 thing that I recommend for people is a physical removal. Do a strong spray of water to actually knock the aphids off of the plant, and literally by hand pick off the rest of the aphids and squish, squish, squish. And then if you want to, after that, do an additional spray. I use a Dr. Bronner's mixed with essential oil. I use a peppermint Dr. Bronner with lavender essential oil, just a really light mixture. I've talked about it previously before, but it's literally a tablespoon of Dr. Bronner's and a few drops of the essential oil into a full-size spray bottle. For the wildlife issues with the rodents, I did what I never wanted to do was I enclosed my plants last year, and it made a world of difference. I just like looking at my plants, and I thought the enclosures weren't attractive, but I did enclose them, and they definitely helped. Dogs generally do help, although some people said in the survey that the dog ate the plant. And now that we have a new hound puppy in our life, I have a dog that loves to dig. So dogs may or may not help. If you have a little ratter like my older dog, he's great at keeping the chipmunks at bay. The other thing that I've suggested, and I plant quite a bit of it around our garden, is to plant mint. They don't like the mint, so they won't eat it, but they do. Whether or not it's a full deterrent is, I think, up for debate. So yeah, with the aphids as being the #1 problems, you just really want to stay on top of the aphids. Like, because if you let it go, it's almost impossible to come back from that. So other pesky pests that you've dealt with, this is the list. Sorry, I'm running out of time, so I'm going by faster, just going straight towards the solutions, which is your solutions that you have told me about that have been really successful was wrapping, specifically using this kind of agriculture cloth. I've heard the essential oil mixed with organic insecticide soap and neem oil, essential oil mixed with Dawn dish soap. Once again, physical removal by spraying by hand or spraying with water or by hand. So you all have something similar in terms of a strategy that I have, and many of you have also had really good success. I am going to try this wrapping strategy this year, so I'm excited to see. Oh, and one person actually suggested putting a damp cloth on the ground near your plants, and it attracted a lot of the bugs away from your plants because they were attracted to the moisture content in the cloth. So something worth a shot. I'm sure you all have a damp cloth lying around somewhere. Your solutions for dealing with rodents: chili pepper flakes, enclosures, tea tree oil, an obstacle course. I think you set up something for get, for the chipmunks to have to get around. Appropriate companions such as mint, garlic, and lavender. And somebody also used, actually I think a couple people used an ultrasonic repeller, which apparently was also very helpful as well. I've seen them at the hardware store. They're a little on the pricey side, but if it works, I'd say go for it. So this is my favorite joke, which is that I'm in a band and we're called The Prevention. We're much better than the cure. Maybe everybody will get that, maybe some will not. But basically, that is my strategy for dealing with things like aphids. You don't want to have to do those solutions because you want to prevent the aphids. And to do that, you need to be observant. You need to check your plants. And I don't mean just like give it a little look. I'm like, have a conversation with your plant. Check the leaves, look underneath it. And honestly, your plant will tell you. Listen to your plant. If your plant all of a sudden goes from looking vibrant and healthy to drooping a little bit, there's probably something up and you need to explore that issue a little further. Oh, plants that need therapy, am I right? So thorough inspections. Like I said, you don't want to get your plants to this image right here. Like, honestly, I look at this image. We had this happen to our tomato plants one year, and I still get the heebie-jeebies looking at these images. Not a situation that is easy to bounce back from. So you stay diligent, and hopefully you catch it when it's in these stages right here. So you can see just a few little aphids right there, something that's perfectly manageable. And one of the things that I've told people is I'm pretty active in terms of stories on Instagram. That's my handle, Pepperbutt. I literally check my plants all the time. And I also post whenever I find aphids. This was 44 weeks ago. This was 42 weeks ago. So 47 weeks ago, 42 weeks ago. So aphids happen and they have the potential to happen again. You just need to stay on it. And guess what? It's a lot easier to deal with your aphids when there's only two. If you get to that previous stage, those previous pictures where it's covered with aphids, it's a lot harder to deal with. And then I also brag about how beautiful my kale looks. I can't help it. But yeah, aphids. And I think, yeah. So once again, if you follow me on social media, you can also directly message me, and I'm pretty active on there. So you can literally essentially text me and I'll tell you about my plants. Okay, your feeding results. And I know I'm starting to run out of time. So I will just say that people have used a variety of compost, fertilizer. Some people did none. And so the key takeaway is that in 2020, everybody who did compost rated success from 4 to 5. Lettuce is a little bit of a mixture. 2021, the results are a little bit less significant. We still have 75%, but I had a much smaller sample size. So with a grain of salt, bottom line is people who used compost for kale had about a 93% success rate. And once again, I'm equating success by you rated your success from 4 to 5 on a scale from 1 to 5. Lettuce, sorry, I have to move you all. 53% success using compost. Fertilizer, 64% success with kale. Fertilizer, 55% success for your lettuce. But here's the thing, if you don't want to fertilize or compost, you don't have time for that. Many of you did nothing and a majority of you still had success with lettuce and kale. So ideas for this year, fertilizer, nitrogen rich. This is the one that I use. It's available at Home Depot. I've had this gallon jug for 3 years and I still have the same one. I dilute it and apply it to the soil. And so as a result, I've had it for a very, very long time and it still does fine. Other people have suggested Down to Earth, Biosol, or Dr. Earth, companion plant with beans, peas, garlic, and mint. Try compost, try mulching. If you want to try something different with your leafy greens, your spicy salad mix this year, and keep a close eye on those lettuces, and provide shade when it gets really, really hot. Or if you're container gardening, just move them into the shade. Keep a strong eye, be observant and diligent for those aphids. And then most importantly, record and report back. I use this information. We all use this information. And so when we're sending out our follow-up survey at the end of the year, we're basically trying to use the information that you've all provide once again, the rest of the gardening community with the best possible chance for success. So definitely keep an eye for that. And these are my cheat sheets. They're in blue so that they're easy to find on the, here, I guess I'll go slowly.
No, Ellison,
Yeah.
You can go until 7:15. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Whew, is getting
Yeah.
running out of breath there. Okay, so these are the little cheat sheets. I have one for container gardening, for your brassica, your cabbage genus, as well as your lettuce. I have your cheat sheet for just general planting directly into a ground or a raised bed. And I'll kind of just leave them up. I'm not going to go through it because I've already talked about all of this, but on the YouTube video, you can very easily just go fast forward to the blue slides and you get your little cheat sheet. I think we'll also be trying to print out some of these to distribute for the actual seedling pickup day, which is Saturday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. in Tahoe City, South Lake Tahoe, and in Truckee at Slow Food Lake Tahoe. Where is the pickup, Mary, for South Lake Tahoe?
It is in the parking lot where Big Five is. I think that's called Crossings.
Perfect.
It's at the Y.
Excellent. So that's where the pickup will be for South Lake Tahoe. Tahoe City is at the Tahoe City Demonstration Garden, or the Tahoe City Field Station, which is off the main road, the corner of Lake Forest and the main road in Tahoe City. Here's your lettuce cheat sheet and your strawberry spinach cheat sheet. So hopefully I've left them up for enough time so that if you're on the YouTube video looking for the information that I went through very quickly, then it's available for you. So I do have a planting and harvesting demo video that I did last year. I'm not going to play it. It is available on our YouTube channel right here, which is youtube.com//UC Davis Tahoe. All of the previous high elevation gardening workshops are recorded and are available there. But I'm gonna just skip that for now. But basically you're planting all of your plants so that it's pretty much right at the apex line. You don't want to bury the center of it. That's kind of how you get soil trapped in there. It will eventually grow out, but you don't want to bury the apex, basically, which is, here is the, which one is this one? This is your Bok Choy. So the Bok Choy especially, you can kind of see, this is like where all the leaves are coming together. You want to bury it right to that point. You don't want to bury that apex in the center. And once again, just amend your soil before planting. If you're planning to amend, which you really should, especially if you planted different vegetables and crops there before. Yeah, once again, social media. I love when people contact me, and I know I have made multiple friends as a result of meeting people on social media through these gardening workshops. So definitely, if you happen to be active on social media, I am probably far too active on it, and I take pictures of everything, especially my dogs. If you like dog pictures, you'll get a lot of those there. So yeah, as I've mentioned, this is a phenology project that we've been doing, Dave, for the last 8 years, I'd say. And so we've been looking at a lot of different varieties, a lot of different vegetables and fruits that have either great success or lesser success in the Tahoe area. And so a lot of this information that you're providing to us is going to help us all have greater success of growing your own tasty, clean, healthy vegetables in the area. And it's not general phenology, which is looking at the basically growth and development stages of plants as a result of changing weather and climate, although we do actually do general phenology at our demonstration gardens to kind of track how native plants are being affected by climate change. But this particular project is looking at varietal comparative phenology. So looking at the growth and development among several plant varieties. And so it's a Tahoe phenology, gardening phenology project. Okay. This is my contact information. If you're all done looking at my face, I'm kind of done looking at my face too. You are definitely welcome to just email me or message me on social media with any questions. But otherwise, if you have any questions, definitely toss them my way. And I think Mary probably has been tracking questions. So I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
Here I am.
Yes, I am there. People have been giving questions through your presentation, and I will bring them up now, and I will be checking the questions as Allison is answering them so that I can pick up any more that you might have. Okay, this is just some comments too. I think it's kind of nice for people to share. Somebody grew bok choy 35 years ago and gave it away to neighbors. Not sure if they knew what to do with it, but it was prolific.
Salads or stir fries. Salads or stir fries.
Yes.
Those are always the go-tos for things like bok choy. And I really can't encourage you more to share with your neighbors. Like everybody in Tahoe, for the most part, gets like a huge kick out of your locally grown vegetables. I know my neighbors do.
Okay, next question. I think you covered this. Can you send us the information about where we pick up our seedlings, just in case we can't listen to the end of the talk?
Definitely.
Well, I guess we're at the end of the talk. So I'm not sure. I think some of that information was on your registration, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. And I'm not sure, does Slow Food send out a reminder for pickup?
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
so I'm sure though you can get the information from the Slow Food website, I think.
Worst comes to worst, if you email anybody at Turk or at the Lake Tahoe Master Gardeners or at Slow Food Tahoe, one of us will have the answer for you.
Yes.
All of us will have the answer for you.
Okay. So for Tatsoi, can we harvest as you go like kale, or should we harvest it all at once?
Harvest as you go is my recommendation, similar to kale, outer leaves growing inside, but it is also, you have the suggestion, if you don't want to do the outer leaves in, you have company coming over and you want a giant salad, you can cut it all off, leave that 1 inch, actually, 1 to 2 inches of the base, and it will grow back again. So you can do a large harvest, or you can harvest just like the same way that you do kale, outside, leaves, inside. Just make sure you don't take the center out completely.
Okay, so I'm confused with that. So you say you harvest the whole thing, but you've got to leave that terminal piece. So how do you do that? Do you just break off all the leaves all at once, or?
So it's the idea that the terminal leaf, the terminal bud, is not as part of like the extended growth. So if this is your, this is also not a good demonstration. Let me go back to one of my pictures. So it goes back to that romaine life hack, which is that the terminal bud is not the center leaves, it's at the base. So your terminal bud is actually inside of this area. So it actually grows out of the center. So even though you harvested the entire leaf, the terminal bud is actually in the very center at the base. And so if you leave that terminal bud in the center base area, so which means that you're cutting it off, which is why I specifically say you're leaving at least an inch for the Tatsoi, 2 to 4 inches for your romaine. That means you're going to leave that terminal bud that's inside the heart. And
Okay,
that
that makes sense.
Yeah.
That does make sense.
So
Okay.
for example, oh, this is an even better picture. So here is your cross section right here. Your terminal bud's actually right in here. That's why you leave about 2 inches for your romaine, because if you cut this off right there, then you're not going to have regrowth.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, this is a comment. I've always found growing lettuce underneath our ponderosa pines perfect for light.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Filtered light from the trees is fantastic for lettuce, for sure. I still prefer container gardening personally for my lettuce anyways, but that's just my personal gardening habit.
Okay. Explain wrapping. That's one comment there.
So that's something that I have not tried yet, and I am trying it this year. I actually just ordered my ag cloth, but I'll go back to that picture again. Let's see. So wrapping is something that is, they specifically have this ag cloth, and I think, and actually I know for sure that I've had people in the survey let me know that they don't use the specific ag cloth, that they've used gauze or they've used tulle material, like Tulle, not Tool. And basically all it is a barrier, a physical barrier for insects. And so for this particular one, right, they're just wrapping their container plant and they're sealing the edges underneath in order to prevent insects from coming inside. I've read that it is also a great deterrent for rodents, just because it's weird and foreign to them. Maybe after several years they'll figure it out, but I'm actually trying this out this year to wrap my whole raised bed area to kind of see what kind of success I have in terms of protecting my raised bed from that chubby ground squirrel that just keeps coming back every year. I see him and he's so chubby, and it's because of me and my vegetables. So this year we'll see. He loves my raised bed specifically, so we're going to give wrapping my raised bed a shot, and so I will have more information for you next season.
Great.
Or I'll post it on social media. You can find out that way too.
A question. When you don't want to have a lot of sun all day long, do you recommend having some sort of shade cloth over your plants? Or it sounds like the wrapping also shades your plants.
Yes, the wrapping will also help with the shading. You can definitely use a shade cloth, like anything that's going to provide shade for those hot summer months is great. I mean, and the idea behind a shade cloth is fantastic because you can allow your leafy greens to get that full sun during the spring when the sun isn't too harsh, during the fall when the sun is also not too harsh, and then you can put up your shade cloth in the summertime. Just be sure that when you put up your shade cloth, you're doing it in a way so that it still gets that full sun for those first few hours in the early morning. And then as the sun travels across, hits your shade cloth, and then your plants are in the shade. So just one of the things that I know, I distinctly remember that I loved learning in the Master Gardener class was kind of like creating the schematic of your yard. Just draw where your house is, draw where like that really large ponderosa is, and track where the sun hits in the morning, in the afternoon, in the PM. You can do little dotted lines around there, and you can actually figure out where the appropriate places are to plant your greens that potentially need that full sun in the morning and maybe want to have that shade in the afternoon when the sun is really coming down.
Okay, there was a question, and I think Annie may have answered part of it. Somebody has a problem double booked for the pickup. Is there a possible to get another time or an alternate pickup in Truckee?
So
I'm
I
not
believe in
sure.
Truckee, you would need to contact the Slow Food Tahoe, and maybe Annie can put their contact information in the chat as well, and just kind of let them know. And if you let them know ahead of time, I would imagine they would make some concessions for you coming and getting it at a different time.
Thank you. And there's one more question here. Just I'm trying to get to my, are romaine and tatsoi the only varieties that we can immerse in water? Can we then transplant to soil?
So the question, let me see if I understand the question right.
Okay.
So you're saying that, going back to my lettuce life hack of you've harvested and then you've harvested but left the 2 inches, and so your romaine is regrowing, and you're asking if you can replant that.
I think that's what it is. Yeah. Or even if you have store-bought romaine and tatsoi, are those the only varieties that you can put in water? I mean, you could put celery in water too. But
As I do with my green onions as well.
yes.
And I don't know the answer to that. That's a great question.
Try it.
I think it's worth a try. Yeah, let me know how it goes. Sorry, I don't have the answer for you. But yeah, I would say it's definitely worth an experiment. We're all in this together. Share the information. Let us know.
Okay, there's another question. How can I obtain a copy of Ellison's full presentation pages? Oh, meaning the PowerPoint. I don't know if you share that too, or I know we have the video.
Yeah, we have the video. I'm happy to export my slides as like a PDF document. If you want to just reach out to me via email, perhaps. You think that would be the easiest, Mary?
That would be good. This is Valerie, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I'll put my email in the chat for everybody, just so you can potentially copy and paste it. And just if you have any additional questions or you're too shy to put them into the Q&A, you're definitely welcome to just email me directly and send me a request for having the full slides, and I will export my slides as a PDF and send them over to you.
I noticed Annie has put something in the chat regarding the website for Slow Food. So you can look there for that information or Google it. I Google it all the time. So thank you, Allison.
Yeah, for sure.
That was a wonderful presentation.
Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. I feel a little winded at the moment. Thank you everybody for coming out. I really appreciate the support, and yeah, good luck gardening. Not that you need it, because you've been just given all of the tips that you need, and we have kale. Yeah. When in doubt, you always have kale.
Yes. Okay, I will end the workshop, and thank you everyone for participating, and enjoy your plants if you ordered them.
Bye.
Bye.